My name is Howard Miller. I am 75 years old. I spent most of my life believing a man's job was simple. Work hard, pay the bills, keep quiet, do not complain, do not cry, do not ask for too much. For many years, I thought that made me strong. But now, sitting alone in my small kitchen in Ohio, with a coffee getting cold beside me, I understand something I wish I had known much earlier. A man can spend his whole life doing everything right and still feel empty at the end. I did not learn this from a book. I learned it from silence. The kind of silence that fills a house after your wife stops asking how your day was. The kind that sits beside you when your children only call on holidays. The kind that follows you from room to room after retirement when nobody needs you the way they used to. Maybe you have felt this too. At this age, we do not fear noise. We fear quiet. I was a road construction supervisor for 38 years. I worked in heat, rain, dust, and cold wind. My hands were rough. My back ached before I turned 50. I left the house before sunrise and came home after dark many nights. My wife, Carol, used to wait for me at the dinner table. In the early years, she smiled when I walked in. She would say, "Howard, sit down before it gets cold." I would wash my hands, sit, eat fast, and barely talk. Not because I did not love her. I did love her, but I was tired. At least, that is what I told myself. She would tell me small things. The neighbor's dog got loose. Our son Eric got into trouble at school. Our daughter Melanie drew a picture of the family. The washing machine made a strange sound. I nodded. I said, I said, I will look at it later. Most times, later never came. There were evenings when Carol sat across from me, waiting for me to ask something, anything. But I thought being present in the chair was enough. I thought bringing home a paycheck was love. I thought silence was peace. I did not understand that silence can become a wall. Years passed like that. Bills paid, house repaired, cars maintained, children raised. But somewhere between overtime shifts and unpaid emotions, I slowly disappeared from my own family. I was there in every photograph, but I was not really there in their memories. That truth hurts more than I can explain. When I retired at 67, I thought life would finally feel peaceful. I imagined long mornings, coffee with Carol, maybe fishing on Tuesdays, maybe fixing the porch steps I had ignored for years. But retirement did not bring peace. It brought questions. Who was I without work? Who needed me now? What was I supposed to do with all those hours? Carol had built her own life by then. She had her church group, her garden club, her sister on the phone every evening. She still cooked, still folded laundry, still moved around the house with quiet purpose, but she no longer waited for me. One morning, I sat beside her while she read the newspaper. I said, "You are quiet today." She did not look up. She said, "Howard, I was quiet for 30 years. You are only noticing now." That sentence stayed with me. It did not sound angry. That made it worse. It sounded tired. A few months later, I started going to a small diner near our house. Not because the food was special. The eggs were often too dry. The coffee tasted burnt. But there were men there like me. Old men, widowers, retired workers, veterans, former truck drivers. Men who wore caps with faded logos and sat in the same booths every morning. We talked about weather, gas prices, football, knee pain, and old cars. Never about loneliness. Never about fear. Never about how strange it feels to wake up and realize nobody is waiting for your opinion anymore. But I saw it in their eyes. I saw it when one man checked his phone every 10 minutes, hoping his daughter had replied. I saw it when another man said his wife had passed 3 years ago, then quickly changed the subject. I saw it when we all laughed too loudly at jokes that were not that funny. That was when I began to understand. So many elderly men feel empty because we were taught to build a life outside ourselves, but not inside ourselves. We learned how to work. We learned how to endure. We learned how to provide. But nobody taught us how to be known. Nobody taught us how to say, "I am scared." Nobody taught us how to say, "I miss you." Nobody taught us how to say, "I need help." And after decades of keeping everything locked away, we should not be surprised when we cannot find the key. One Sunday afternoon, Carol found me sitting in the garage. I was holding an old baseball glove that belonged to Eric. She stood by the door and asked, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just cleaning." But I was not cleaning. I was remembering. I remembered Eric asking me to play catch when he was 10. I had said, "Not today. I am tired." He asked again the next week. I said the same thing. After a while, he stopped asking. That is how children leave you sometimes. Not in anger, not all at once. They just stop asking. I held that glove and felt something break open inside me. Carol walked over slowly and sat on an old paint bucket. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "I think I missed too much." She looked at me with sad eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "you did." The garage felt different after Carol said those words. "You did." She did not raise her voice. She did not blame me. She simply told the truth. Sometimes the quiet truth hurts more than an angry argument. That night, I could not sleep. I walked through the house after midnight. I stopped outside my son's old bedroom. It had become a storage room years ago. Boxes were stacked where his bed once stood. His baseball trophies sat on a dusty shelf. I picked one up. Most improved player. I smiled for a second. Then I realized something. I had never seen him receive it. I had been working overtime that evening. I remembered telling myself there will be other games. Life kept giving me other games, until there were none left. At 75, memories become strange companions. They arrive without knocking. They sit beside you. They remind you of moments you thought were too small to matter. A missed school concert, a family picnic canceled because of work, an anniversary dinner postponed. One promise after another. I always believed I was sacrificing for my family. Only later did I realize they would have traded some of that money just to have more of me. Maybe you understand what I mean. When we are young, we think our family needs everything we can buy. When we are old, we discover they mostly wanted our time. A week later, I decided to call Eric. I stared at my phone for almost 20 minutes before pressing his number. Funny, isn't it? I could supervise hundreds of construction workers without fear, but calling my own son made my hands shake. He answered after the fourth ring. "Hey, Dad." His voice sounded surprised. Not excited, just surprised. We talked about the weather, his job, traffic, nothing important. I wanted to tell him I missed him. The words reached my throat, then they stopped. Old habits are stubborn. Before hanging up, he said, "Take care, Dad." I answered, "You too." That was it. I sat in my chair afterward, feeling even lonelier. Not because the conversation went badly, because I had wasted another chance. A few days later, Carol placed an old photo album on the kitchen table. "I found this in the closet," she said. We looked through it together. There were pictures from vacations, Christmas mornings, birthdays, fishing trips. As I turned each page, I noticed something that made my chest tighten. In so many photographs, I was standing a little apart from everyone else, always smiling, always tired, always ready to leave for work. Carol gently touched one picture. It showed Melanie holding my hand when she was 5 years old. "She adored you," Carol whispered. "I know." "No," she said softly. "I do not think you do." I looked at her. "She waited by the window every Friday because you promised to come home early." I closed the album. I remembered those Fridays. Most of them became late nights at work. I never imagined she remembered every single one. Children count promises differently than adults. One evening I went back to the diner. The usual group was there. Frank, Walter, Joe, Harold. We drank coffee and talked about baseball. Then something unusual happened. Walter quietly said, "My grandson graduated yesterday." We all smiled. Then he added, "I watched it online." "Why online?" Frank asked. Walter looked down at his cup. "They forgot to invite me." Nobody spoke, not one of us, because every man at that table suddenly wondered if something similar could happen to him. Eventually, Walter forced a smile. They were probably busy. We all nodded, but nobody believed it. Driving home, I kept thinking about that conversation. Empty. That word finally made sense. It is not about having an empty house. It is about carrying years of words that were never spoken. It is about loving people without knowing how to show it. It is about believing strength means silence. One afternoon, my daughter Melanie surprised us with a visit. She hugged Carol first. Then she hugged me. I noticed she held on a little longer than usual. "Dad," she smiled, "would you like to have lunch with me tomorrow? Just us." I almost said I was busy. Old habits again. Instead, I said, yes, I would like that. The next afternoon, we sat in a small cafe. For the first 15 minutes, we talked about ordinary things. Then she looked at me. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Were you happy when we were kids? The question caught me off guard. I thought I was. She nodded slowly. I always wondered. Why? You smiled so little. I stared at my coffee. I was tired. I know, she said, but as children we did not understand tired. We thought maybe you did not enjoy being with us. Those words reached places inside me that had been closed for decades. My eyes filled with tears. For the first time in my life, I did not hide them. I am sorry, I whispered. I truly am. Melanie reached across the table and took my hand. I did not come here for an apology. What did you come for? I came because I still have my dad. We both cried quietly. Nobody in the cafe paid much attention. Maybe because everyone has their own story. Or maybe because people understand tears better than we think. As we walked outside, she wrapped her arm around mine, just like she had done when she was a little girl. For the first time in many years, I did not feel completely empty. For the first time in many years, I did not feel completely empty. That feeling stayed with me all the way home. It was not joy, not yet. It was something quieter, hope. I had spent decades believing that once a relationship became distant, it stayed that way forever. Maybe that was another lie I had told myself. The following Saturday, I woke up earlier than usual. Instead of sitting in my recliner and watching the morning news, I walked outside. The neighborhood looked different. Children were riding bicycles. A young father was teaching his son how to throw a football. An older couple held hands while walking their dog. I had lived on that street for 22 years, yet I had never really noticed it. When you spend your whole life chasing tomorrow, you stop seeing today. Later that afternoon, Eric called. That alone surprised me. Dad, he said, I was thinking, would you like to come over next weekend? I smiled before I answered. I would love to. When I arrived at his house the next Saturday, my grandson Noah opened the front door. Grandpa! He hugged me without hesitation. Children have a beautiful way of loving without keeping score. Inside, Eric was standing in the kitchen making hamburgers. For a few minutes, neither of us knew what to say. Then he handed me a soda. Want to help me with the grill? Sure. We stood outside watching the burgers cook. The silence felt familiar, but this time I refused to let it win. I owe you something, I said. Eric looked at me. What do you mean? I spent too many years at work. He did not answer. I thought I was giving you everything. You gave us a lot, Dad, but not enough of myself. He looked down at the grill. After a long pause, he quietly said, I used to wait by the front window every evening. Those words sounded almost exactly like what Carol had told me. I know. I wanted to show you every little thing. My homework, my baseball cards, the treehouse I built. I kept thinking, maybe tonight. I felt my eyes burn. I am sorry, he nodded. I know you are. Then something happened that I never expected. He put his hand on my shoulder. I stopped being angry a long time ago. I just missed you. Those 5 words were heavier than anything I had ever carried at work. I realized something in that moment. Most families are not waiting for perfect fathers. They are waiting for present fathers. That evening, Noah asked if I wanted to play catch in the backyard. For a second, I almost said, my knees are hurting. Then I caught myself. I smiled. Bring your glove. For nearly an hour, we threw that baseball back and forth. Some throws were wild, some were perfect. Noah laughed every time I missed. I laughed too. I cannot remember the last time I laughed that freely. On the drive home, I kept thinking about Eric as a little boy. Maybe I could not give him those moments back, but I could give them to Noah. Sometimes healing does not erase the past. It simply changes what happens next. A few weeks later, Carol and I began eating dinner differently. The television stayed off, the phones stayed in another room. At first, it felt awkward. We had spent years hiding behind background noise. Now, all we had was conversation. Some nights we talked for an hour, other nights only 15 minutes. It did not matter. We were learning each other again. One evening she smiled and said, "You are listening now." I am trying. You always heard me." She reached across the table. "But now you are listening. There is a difference, a big one." As the months passed, I noticed something about the men at the diner. Many of them were carrying the same invisible weight I had carried. One morning, Frank admitted he had not spoken to his daughter in 4 years. Joe confessed he had never once told his wife he loved her before she passed away. Harold quietly said retirement made him feel useless. For the first time, none of us changed the subject. We simply listened. Maybe that is what older men need most. Not advice, not solutions, just someone willing to hear the words we buried for decades. I started calling Eric every Sunday, not because there was important news, just because relationships are built in ordinary moments. I began writing birthday cards instead of only signing my name. I started telling people I appreciated them before life took away the chance. None of those things made me feel weak. They made me feel alive. Looking back, I finally understand why so many elderly men feel empty. It is not because they failed. Most of them worked hard. Most of them sacrificed. Most of them loved deeply. The emptiness comes from spending a lifetime believing love can be understood without being spoken. It cannot. People cannot hear silent love. They have to see it. They have to feel it. And sometimes, they simply need us to say the words, "I love you. I missed you. I am proud of you. I am sorry." Those 4 sentences can heal years of silence. I only wish I had learned them sooner. I only wish I had learned them sooner. That thought stayed with me for weeks, not because it filled me with guilt anymore, because it reminded me that every day I still had was a gift. At 75, I could not change my past, but I could decide what kind of man I wanted to be for whatever time I had left. One crisp autumn morning, Carol and I sat on our front porch. The maple trees across the street had turned bright shades of red and gold. She handed me a warm cup of coffee. "You seem lighter these days," she said. "I think I am." She smiled. "I can see it." We sat there without speaking for a while. Years ago, our silence had been filled with distance. Now it was filled with comfort. There is a difference. A peaceful silence comes after words have been shared. A painful silence comes when words are being hidden. I finally understood that. A month later, our family gathered for Thanksgiving. The house was louder than it had been in years. Noah and his little sister ran through the hallway laughing. Melanie was helping Carol in the kitchen. Eric stood beside me, carving the turkey. At one point, I looked around the room and quietly stepped onto the back porch. Not because I was lonely, because I felt overwhelmed. In the best possible way. Eric noticed and followed me outside. "You okay, Dad?" I nodded. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "I almost missed all of this." He looked at the yard. "You are here now." Such simple words, yet they carried so much grace. We cannot always repair yesterday, but we can still show up today. After dinner, Noah came running toward me with a football. "Grandpa, one more game?" I laughed. "I thought you would never ask." We played until the sun began to disappear behind the trees. I was slower than I used to be. My knees reminded me of my age with every step, but I did not care. I was exactly where I wanted to be. Months passed. Winter came. The diner remained part of my weekly routine, but something had changed there too. The conversations became more honest. Frank finally called his daughter. It was awkward. It was emotional, but it was a beginning. Joe started volunteering at the local food pantry. He said sitting at home had been making him disappear. Harold joined a woodworking group. He laughed more than I had ever seen him laugh. None of us had become young again. We had simply stopped pretending we were not hurting. One morning, Frank looked around the table and said something I will never forget. "We spent our whole lives fixing cars, roads, machines, and houses." He smiled sadly. "But we forgot to maintain our own hearts." Nobody laughed. Nobody argued. We all quietly nodded, because every one of us knew he was right. Not long after that, I found an old notebook in the attic. Most of its pages were blank, so I decided to use it. Not for appointments, not for grocery lists, for memories. Every evening, I wrote one page. Sometimes I wrote about my parents. Sometimes about my first date with Carol. Sometimes about mistakes I hoped my grandchildren would never repeat. I wanted them to know who I really was, not just the man who worked, the man who learned, the man who changed. One Sunday afternoon, Noah asked if he could read some of it someday. I smiled. "You can read all of it." "Really?" "Really. I want you to know your grandpa completely." His smile reminded me so much of Eric when he was young. This time, I did not let the moment pass. I hugged him tightly. As we get older, we realize something that seemed impossible when we were young. Success is not measured by promotions, or paychecks, or how many hours we worked. It is measured by who feels comfortable calling your name, who wants to sit beside you, who knows your heart. Looking back over 75 years, I have made plenty of mistakes. I missed birthdays. I worked too many weekends. I believed silence made me strong. I believed emotions were something a man should carry alone. I was wrong. Strength is telling your wife she matters. Strength is calling your children before they have to call you. Strength is apologizing without making excuses. Strength is letting your grandchildren see you cry if the tears are honest. If there is one thing I hope younger men understand, it is this. Your family will not remember every paycheck you earned. They will remember whether you looked up when they walked into the room, whether you listened, whether you laughed with them, whether you made them feel loved. Do not wait until retirement to become present. Do not wait until your children are grown to tell them you are proud of them. Do not wait until your marriage becomes quiet before you start talking. Life moves faster than any of us expect. One ordinary day becomes the last school play, the last family vacation, the last bedtime story, the last chance to say what has been sitting in your heart for years. I cannot go back and change the man I was, but I can be grateful for the man I became. Today, when I sit on the porch beside Carol, we still drink our coffee together. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we simply watch the sunrise. She reaches for my hand without thinking. I squeeze it gently. Neither of us needs many words anymore. Not because we have nothing left to say, because we finally said the things that mattered. And if you ask me why so many elderly men feel empty, I would answer this. It is not old age that creates the emptiness. It is years of believing that love can stay locked inside your heart and still be understood. Do not make the mistake I made. Say the words, spend the time, take the walk, answer the phone, play one more game of catch, sit at the dinner table a little longer, because one day those ordinary moments will become the greatest treasures of your life. And if you are fortunate enough to realize that before it is too late, you may discover, as I finally did at 75, that a full heart has never depended on how much you earned, only on how deeply you loved and how bravely you chose to show it.